Do you think that the government should be reducing the level of migration because of its impact on inflation?
Well, I think, and we've got our forecasts on the NOM in the budget, and they outline what they are. And I would acknowledge the huge amount of work that Claire O'Neill is doing with reviewing the migration system, working with Andrew Giles on that. And I think what we are seeing, even though, and I've seen the commentary in the paper, even though, what we're seeing essentially is a return back from pre-COVID levels, and we're still, even when you see them, and the numbers that we outlined in the budget, are large, they are essentially a pull forward from people returning to Australia and less people leaving Australia. I think the issue where, people are rightly focusing around housing, is a supply side constraint. And that's why the government has been so determined to actually have the federal government back at the table dealing with housing and the housing shortage. So I think rather than seeking to apportion blame, it's really about responding to a wasted decade where the Commonwealth wasn't at the table on housing to any serious degree, and getting through some of those policies that we're trying to get through. Our recent announcement about the Housing Accelerator is part of that, working with the states and territories to ease some of those pressures to increase supply. But, it goes back to things like the Housing Fund. What role can the Commonwealth play to alleviate pressure and improve supply on housing and on infrastructure, where we're reviewing the infrastructure program as well?
Minister, do you share the RBA's concerns that current rates of wage growth will fuel inflation if there isn't an increase in productivity?
Well, I think the government's view on this is that we want strong, sustainable and responsible wages growth, and we want a more productive economy, and I think we... Hey?
Are current rates responsible?
Well, hang on, let me answer your first question. So on wages, we are seeing welcome increases in wages growth for the first time in a long time. And that's really important for working people when they're dealing with some of the cost increases that we're seeing across the economy right now. And our budget, outlines our expectations about wages growth, and we welcome that. On the productive side of the economy, we've seen a wasted decade on that as well, and we're doing what we can. You won't overturn some of those challenges on the productive side or on productivity in a year after we've seen failed years of action. So, when we're looking at our fee-free TAFE, our investment in skills, the work we're doing in energy, some of the work we've got to do around technology and driving innovation, all of that is to focus on improving productivity, but we don't think it needs to come at expense of working people getting a reasonable wage increase. And I read, I'm just looking for the decision, when I read the decision today, I took it that, and the bank has said this for some time now, that they're keeping an eye on both, and I think that's their responsibility, but I don't see it as anything different to what they've been saying for some time.
Minister, core inflation is still high and it's coming down quite slowly, and the Reserve Bank is a bit limited in what it can do to address supply-side inflation. So what else is the government, or can the government, do besides the measures that they've already announced?
Well, I think, we are doing a lot on this side when you look at it. Our economic plan, and we outlined this in the budget, was to look at where we could take the edge off some of those cost of living pressures, not adding to inflation, look at how we can repair our fiscal buffers, show some restraint, find some savings, repair the budget over time so it's in better shape, and then look at how we invest in those drivers of growth for the future. And so I think when you look, and when I think across government, there is work happening in pretty much every single portfolio. But we have been in government for a year. There's work underway. I think when you look at, we know that we have to invest in our people, train them up, get them ready for the jobs of the future. We need to make sure we get this energy transition right. We're doing all of those things and looking at how we support new industries of the future under the National Reconstruction Fund and some of the work that Ed Husick is doing. There is a huge amount of work going on. Even National Cabinet looking at the workload that they've got on in dealing with some of the pressures that face all governments. You can see it's a pretty hectic agenda after a decade of not a lot happening.
Minister, do you agree with the RBA's assessment that the unemployment rate will need to climb to 4.5% in order to bring inflation back to target?
Well, I think our budget, from memory, our budget had unemployment ticking up to about 4.25% in 23-24 and 4.5% in 24-25, and that aligns with the returning of essentially over the next 18 months of inflation back to the target range. That's in our forecasts. I think they're largely aligned with the bank's forecasts. And I think it speaks to the challenge that's ahead of us as we manage, the inflation challenge, is that, as part of that we will see more people out of work, and the government needs to respond to that at the right time too.
Minister, as a senator for the ACT, what do you make of the Barr government considering voluntary assisted dying for teenagers as young as 14? Do you hold any concerns there may not be enough safeguards for this kind of proposal?
Well, it's, I stopped sort of speculating on what the Assembly does when I left the Assembly. I mean, I think that a job for the Commonwealth Government was to remove the restrictions on the territory governments being able to consider these matters, but these are matters that are resolved at the territory level. They are a mature parliament. They undertake wide consultation with their communities, and ultimately it'll be a matter for them.
Minister, these are your constituents, the ACT, the people of the ACT.
Yes, indeed. And as an ACT constituent myself, I'll watch that debate. But these are matters that are resolved by a democratically elected parliament. I have no doubt, as a mature parliament, as a responsible parliament, they will undertake appropriate consultations and then finalise their position. And then it's a matter for the Assembly to determine.
Minister, you mentioned...
Sorry, I'll go to Tom.
Thank you. Is it irresponsible for stakeholders and some of your colleagues to push for more spending from the $19 billion surplus announced at the end of last week, given the calibration and careful targeting that you've discussed?
Well, look, I can understand people, responding to, constituents themselves who, these House of Reps members of Parliament more broadly, listening to their constituents and supporting, I guess the feeling around cost of living pressures, we're all out and about, we hear it all the time. I think, as the cost of living measures that we have in the budget flows, people will see that when they get it on their energy bills, when they see it in their childcare fees, when they go to buy their medicines, when they get bulk billed for a medical consultation. People will see that these measures are there to support and ease and take off cost of living pressures where they are. In terms of the surplus, I think it is important when we look at the work that we've done to repair the budget. Where we've put the effort into returning upward revisions to revenue and bank that at a point when inflation was highest. We did that for a purpose. We think it's important to, put back in place those fiscal buffers that you need for when the next time comes around that you need them. So getting the budget back in shape is, a core economic core priority for the government. But we don't also sidestep the issue that we need to keep an eye on things we can do to support cost of living, and I think members of Parliament are always going to represent their constituents. Good on them. That's what they're there for. We're doing that in the budget. We think, delivering the first surplus in 15 years is important. Our interest payments will be less. The amount of money we have to borrow for the deficits going forward will be less. There are good reasons why we have been so strong on the budget repair side of things, and it again helps with the inflation challenge.
That's the Acting Treasurer, Katy